Okay, so maybe more than in other weeks, this is a message for myself. It's something that I need to tell myself a lot of times. And by the way, filming this and filming everything up to today in the past year is me doing something in line with the message that I'm trying to convey today. So I'd like to start with something that is well known in the realm of psychology and behavioral sciences, and something that is lived also, I think, by you, because it's lived also by me, and I'm not special. And there is this saying that we make decisions based on emotion and then justify those decisions with logic. So we are emotional beings. The decisions that we are making are emotional at their essence, in their core. And then we use the logic to explain them away, right? Because we cannot, allow this tension of it not making logical sense. But the decision as such is simply downstream of something that we feel, right? And it starts, it spans like both simple decisions, like what movie I want to watch today, to who I want to marry, who I want to make, an acquaintance with, who I want to have around me, who I want to become friends with, and so on. The problem with this part is that logic becomes sometimes simply an excuse to play it safe. Because these emotions, most of the time, are not positive emotions. And when it comes down to actually aspiring to achieve something great, especially something that you didn't ever achieve before, and you have no evidence for being able to do it, you cannot expect to feel, at the beginning at least, only positive, upbeat emotions. You will feel anxiety. You will feel fear. You will have doubt. You will feel this kind of physiological tension that is just signaling danger in your head. And it feels like danger because it's unknown. You have no means to really understand what's coming, right? You are actively pursuing something for which you have no basis of knowing that you will really succeed in doing it, in achieving the goals that you have. So the accompanying emotion at the beginning is not pleasant, of course, because your brain tries to keep you safe. Your brain tries to predict this future on the basis of something that you don't have a lot of proof on. You look at your past and you don't have a lot of insights to draw from to convince your logical brain that indeed it's worth pursuing. So, on the basis of this negative overall state, this physiological state of tension, this emotion that is simmering at the level of, keeping you on your toes, a bit, a bit anxious, a bit, how can I say, you recognize it, right? What does your logical brain do? It reasons why you should not do what you need to do logically at the end. Purely logically, you know what you have to do in order to succeed. It's simple. You know everything that you need to know in order to achieve your goals in a purely logical way, right? If we would devoid like the logical mind from the emotional mind, let's say, if you would have emotional and an emotional and a logical part of your mind, if you would have to separate the emotion from the logic, you have to admit to yourself that you already know exactly what you have to do. And I can prove that to you by giving to you, by creating this narrative for you, where I explain you a situation that someone else is confronted with, and then I would guarantee that you would give them the best advice possible, expert advice. It so happens that that person would be exactly you, right? That narrative that I would craft, it's simply your own narrative. And seeing it somehow from a detached position, objectively, let's say, you would really understand what that person should be doing. But when that person is you and you are living it, you cannot follow basically your own advice in a way, right? And I think I heard also an interesting quote at some point that said that wisdom is nothing more than being able to follow your own advice. Amazing. Most things are simple, but it's just very difficult to follow up on. Why? Because in the first person subjective experience of life, you cannot live life using logic. You live life using your emotional compass. How you feel about your day-to-day is guiding the decisions that you're making. And then the logic, especially if you have, like a highly analytical mind, if you're an engineer, for example, like me, you use logic to justify why you did what you did, because you cannot live in this tension of not having a reason why you did something. You cannot say, you know what, I'm just making emotional decisions, so I don't have really a good reason why. I'm just scared. You cannot admit that to yourself. So you will find a reason, a very, Jocko Willink calls this the legalese, like a very professional lawyer, in which you are creating this very sophisticated argument for which you are doing, something, which seems from the outside like a highly elevated thinking, but is basically, just some fancy excuse. It's some fancy words for, to justify, why you didn't do the obvious thing, because you cannot simply admit to yourself that you are scared to do it, right? So it's very interesting, right, how intelligence builds this kind of bulletproof cage for yourself, because you spend so much time in creating this bulletproof narrative through your own thinking to keep you away from reaching your goals. Isn't this fascinating? So how can you override this? How can you do it different? Well, I would argue that, again, the first step in transforming yourself, the first step in a transformation process is awareness. The fact that you are aware of this happening to you, and I'm talking about myself, by the way, because I see myself on the screen. um, the first step in transformation is awareness. So admit it to yourself. See it for what it is. The second step is in starting to build new evidence, to collect proof of your own doing, of things that are natural doings, if you want, of your future self, of the person you want to become or meet in the future, who is already doing naturally the things that lead to the things that you want to have today. You know this be, do, have thing, right? First become the person, then let that person do its thing, do the things that that person naturally does, because by doing that, you get to have the fruits of these doings. But these doings, right in the middle, are not forced. They are the natural doings of this person. And let me give you a simple example. You know these people, right? These stories, these sad stories otherwise, of people who won, the big pot. Is it called the pot? Anyway, the lottery, right? The huge lottery wins, like 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, whatever. And they play for their whole lives. And they just pray that at some point they win this lottery ticket, right? And yes, of course, sometimes they get struck by what seems like incredible luck, right? And good fortune. And they win $100 million. And you also know that most of these stories, if not all of them, of people who won the lottery, they end up very sad, right? These people get to live their, what they thought to be their most amazing life possible for a couple of years. And because they have no financial literacy, no education whatsoever in actually keeping those money, they're just spending it on everything possible, right? They create this artificial life of lavish, expenses all over the place. They are buying cars, left and right. They're buying everything that they can see basically with those money in an artificial way, because they never experienced that before. And because of the lack that they lived up to that point, they are now releasing this kind of tension. Now they can actually be free, and buy stuff. The problem with that, of course, is that at some point those money will get, consumed. And of course, they will return not to their original state in which they were poor, but in a much more difficult position where they are now poor, like without the money as such, but also with the memory of an artificial life that they will never be able to create again. Because of course, they don't have the capacity to make that kind of money. And winning another lottery ticket is highly unlikely. So they've lived this artificial life for a couple of years. They wasted everything. They then remember how it was possible for them to live, but now they lost all their money, right? Because they had no ways to actually maintain it. They didn't invest even a part of it. They just blown it away. And now they are living in this state of not havingness, right, if you want, which is more like this psychological torture that they now have to live with their whole life. So, was it worth it? Would you wish that on your best friend to win the lottery, to go through that experience, and then suffer for the rest of their lives, remembering those golden 2 years in which they were able to spend money on distractions? Or would you wish them to learn through their own means the value of making money and keeping money, so that when they actually become the person who is able to make the amount of money and learn what they need to learn to keep that money and invest them so they don't waste them, they naturally do the things which give them what they want in the first place when they start to play the lottery, which is what? They want some sort of financial stability. They want some sort of, release pressure from their daily struggles. They want to be able to make an income ultimately, to live in a decent way and to afford some decent things, right? To not live in poverty anymore. But what is more important than the money is the ability to make them and keep them. So it's not the having, right? Winning the lottery is the having. But if you attach this having, which is artificial, to this person who didn't become the person able to actually keep the money and spend it wisely, you're just basically ruining them. That having is an artificial having. They are not supposed to have $10 million because they have no means to actually spend it and consume them in a wise way, right? They don't know what to do with it. the person that wins that money is not capable to do the right things in order to keep having the things that they want to have ultimately for the rest of their lives. They are just not that person yet. So they need to become the person, right? You want someone that you care about. You want to contribute in a way that, using the advice that you give them or through your contributions, help them become this person who is naturally doing the things that leads them to having the kind of life that they want. But this becoming process is what matters the most, right? And I take myself in this situation. I told myself for 30 years or more that I'm not a creative person, that I don't know how to think or what to think about stuff. I just need to follow the path. I need someone to tell me how to execute, right? What to execute and how to do it. Give me the procedure. So my whole life, through no fault of anyone in specific, but just as a byproduct of living in a country where education was not the kind of education that I now want to offer my kids, right? Where I had to learn stuff by memory and reproduce them by heart, because that was supposed to be what I should have been, learning, not actually training my mind, training my brain how to think freely, how to hold a paradox in my mind and how to be okay with both extreme at the same time, how to be okay with someone disagreeing with me and not taking it personal, how can I make my argument even if it's not a popular argument. These things are never taught in school, especially not in the school that I grew up in Romania. The education also didn't help that much, because this kind of education in which you allow the kid to explore and grow in a way that is more, natural for him, it's not normal. You are like putting the child on a path which looks to be the best path and more conducive, the most conducive to him achieving some sort of financial stability through a lifelong career, which, by the way, of course, doesn't exist anymore these days. This is something that I had to fight against in a way. And it took me 65 plus videos like this released weekly, in which I had little time to prepare for the topic that I was talking about, because life, right? Because I'm a full-time professional. I have 2 kids. I have a lot of stuff to do, and I cannot afford to invest 8 hours or even 4 hours in making these videos. So what? Guess what? I have maybe 1 hour or 2 hours in which I have to come up with the idea, create some bullet points, rant about it for 20 plus minutes like this, because I don't have time to cut it, to edit it, to put what kind of, animations in between. I cannot afford that. So guess what? I had to become creative, right? I had to confront this limiting belief in which I thought my whole life, and I trained my mind, I programmed my mind into believing that I am not creative. I had to challenge that. And it started with me creating the first video. And then that first video became clear proof and evidence that I might be a bit creative. And then the next week, I did it again. And then the next week, I did it again. And then for 50, 60 more weeks, I did it again. And that doing it again is what matters most. That's the process which matters more than any kind of having or goal that I might dream of in the future, because I'm living my dream today. Me being able to speak like this freely and articulate these otherwise fuzzy concepts in a way that it's not completely, strange or cringe, at least not for me at this point, it's an incredible progress for me. And these 60 plus videos, they are undeniable proof that I am creative. And to quote James Clear, creativity is most times just the synthesis of 2 things which have not been previously connected. Nothing more than that. And because I choose to believe and take this definition as a good definition for creativity, I decided that I am a creative person. Not only that I am slightly creative, that I am very creative at this point. If 1 year ago I would have thought that I am a bit creative because maybe I didn't have too much proof, now because of this very process, which looks a bit, rushed or a bit messy or, unfiltered or whatever, this very process gives me such a proof, so much evidence that I am being creative against the definition of James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, that I trust, right? And I choose to believe that this is a good definition of creativity. Other people might disagree with, and also I don't care. For me, this definition of creativity, when I heard it in the discussion he had with Andrew Huberman, resonated with me. Creativity is most times the synthesis of two things which have not been previously connected. Amazing. So I don't have to invent another wheel to be creative. I need to be able to talk my own truth, even if it doesn't sound like something that everyone would acknowledge at the first glance. That's why I'm talking about more or less the same things for more than a year now, because there are elements there that I believe to be important, and I take my time to articulate them better and better and better. So, I want to leave you with a powerful message. You decide the life you want to create for yourself. You are the architect of your own life. You create your life by your own design, by nothing more than simply accumulating undeniable proof that you are who you say you are, that you are becoming every single day the person that inspires you. And this person that I'm looking at today on this little screen inspires the hell out of me. And if you know me well enough, you know how critic I am of myself. And saying this thing and putting it on the internet, if this is not progress and proof of my own growth and evolution, then nothing is.